It's Ryder Cup week. We are less than 24 hours from the 2025 Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black teeing off. And joining us today for a special live at lunch will be PGA Master Professional and Second Swing Master Fitter Blaine Seitz. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sean Bauer, filling in for Drew Mahol today. And Blaine, we have quite an event this week and quite a conversation to talk about. But before we get too deep into the Ryder Cup talk, let's just kind of hear from you. You're down at the PGA Coaching Center there in Frisco. How's everything been just going for you down there this year so far?
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited for this live at lunch. Like you said, it's a very big week in the golf world, and it's always exciting when we have these big events to kind of hear some of the buzz that's going around the players. We've been fortunate here at the PGA Coaching Center. We've been open a little bit over 18 months now. We're open 7 days a week. We have an amazing team down here. And so a lot of the conversation that I know we're going to get into today is going to be related to some of the players at the Ryder Cup and some of the equipment that they're using and some of the trends that we're seeing both at that level of professional as well as what we have here for the everyday golfer. And maybe saying everyday golfer is a little bit limiting. We have the ability to fit all 14 clubs for every skill possible. Anything from brand new, custom owned, or fit right here at the coaching center to our Dallas store just down the road in the Colony, where we can get you fit for some.
Yeah, absolutely, Blaine. Well, you're out at the Frisco campus there, and I know you were out at the the captain's picks announcement when Keegan made the picks official. Just what was that experience like, seeing that live, and then what's kind of the buzz been like on campus, with this being the PGA of America as kind of, marquee event of the year? Blaine, can you hear me
Sorry
down
there,
there?
Sean. I think I might be breaking up a little bit. I caught about half of that.
Okay, so you're down at the on the Frisco campus there, PGA of America Coaching Center. I know you got to go to the captain's picks announcement when Keegan selected his 6 captain's picks, and then so what was that kind of like? And then what's just the buzz been like around campus this week? Leading up into the Ryder Cup.
Yeah, I mean, first off, it was a really cool experience to be there, to be at the PGA of America headquarters in the media room while everything was going on, kind of seeing behind the scenes. Really cool stuff with some of the players who were there in attendance, like Lee Trevino. We had Brant Snedeker and Gary Woodland, which was really cool, who are also helping out in the President's Cup world. And, one of the big things, I think, the big word that we keep hearing when it comes to the American team and Keegan Bradley is this, in a sense, underdog, if you will. And there's a lot of talk about how Keegan and sort of just how he's come up playing and coming through the ranks as a New England golfer. He's always had this feeling of being an underdog and kind of coming at from behind the 8 ball, if you will. And so it was really interesting to hear how he handled some of the questions coming from the media department. They were, I don't know, I guess the best way of saying is it was almost like they were poking at him a little bit, trying to get him to slip up or answer certain questions or try to frustrate him or however you want to frame it. But I thought he did a brilliant job of handling those questions very professionally. You can tell that he's very geared up and ready to go out and play, and just his background and his story, the connection that he has to that course at Bethpage, just being in the right place at the right time. I feel like there's going to be a lot of positive energy going into this. And we have on paper an incredible team. I think the chemistry this year is going to be really good as well. And then the real winner is going to be the course. And we have one of the greatest architectural designs from A.W. Tillinghast, who shows his face on a number of different venues throughout the year and has hosted other major championships. And it'd be really great to see how the venue handles this type of a format.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be It looks fantastic up there. Hopefully they don't get too much rain today, and the course can kind of firm up to give us really, truly, the best of the best competition. But last question here before we get into the Ryder Cup gear. Congratulations, from all of us on completing, your PGA Masters program. But can you give us a little background on what that is and what it means?
Yeah, absolutely. And I very much appreciate it. It's been a long journey to get here. I became a Class A PGA professional in February of 2013, and here we are 12 and a half years later, finally reaching the highest designation that you can get as a PGA professional. And essentially what it means is that over the last 10 plus years of experience within my specialization, which is the teaching and coaching branch, which is where club fitting falls in, I've basically, rather than learning new information, I'm now contributing information into the education department and into the golf world, and taking all the things that I've learned over this decade plus and creating a system of how to help golfers play better. And it's a very holistic approach. The methodology that I've developed focuses on 5 pillars of performance, which are mindset, wellness, mobility, fitness, and play. And then, of course, in that top one, the play element is where club fitting is. It's one of the lowest hanging fruits of being able to help players achieve better golf. Making sure that your clubs fit you is so important. And a lot of those other elements are really hard to overcompensate or to work around. If you're not fit properly, you're always going to have some kind of compensation, and you could hurt yourself. If you have clubs that aren't fit for you properly and you keep doing the wrong things over and over again, you increase your risk of injury. And that's a big thing in my world is how do you prevent that? And sort of my background, not just in the golf world, but in the fitness space as well. I worked for a number of years with some very, very high level CrossFit athletes. And my job was to build mobility programs to make sure that they weren't getting hurt. And so understanding the physiology and the biomechanics side of things and playing it together in the club fitting world is so important. And just making sure that those clubs are an extension of who you are and allow you to express yourself through this game. It's been a very rewarding experience, and definitely couldn't have done it without the help and support of the Second Swing family.
Yeah, well, once again, congratulations. And the amount of expertise and insight, you not only provide, golfers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but, to the other Second Swing fitters and Second Swing team members is greatly appreciated. But let's get into our main topic. It is Ryder Cup time, and we want to take a deep dive into the equipment and kind of get the fitter's perspective on some of this equipment. So, we've done what's in the bags for every player. We have, top trending clubs, top club trends, and some unique clubs, all sorts of different angles here as, the golf's biggest event is here. But one of the key ones was, Titleist was the most popular driver across the board. You had 8 players total playing a Titleist driver. On the American side, you had 5 of the 12, so nearly half the team playing a Titleist driver. But interestingly, there was kind of an even split among GT2 and GT3. And I guess not so much that part, but you've seen players like, Patrick Cantlay, Cam Young, who had previously kind of played the 3 model in the TSR, TSI, TS series, and they switched into the GT2. Justin Thomas had done that, and he actually just went back to a GT3. But just curious why you think, these players that had traditionally played kind of that, lower spinning, more adjustable head have moved into kind of that core, more forgiving model of the GT2.
Yeah, it's a really good question, one that to a certain extent we can only speculate about. And at the end of the day, it's got to be hitting more fairways, minimizing the miss, right? That's one of the reasons why any player comes in to get fit, is not necessarily to make the good shots better. If you're already one of the best players in the world, there's not a huge room of improvement there, but it's how do we make our misses better? How can we have a poor shot and still get away with it? And we're talking at the highest level, they might only miss it by a dimple or two, a little bit heel side, toe side, high, low. But when we look at, say, the typical player who's here in the Bay, they might miss it a ball higher, lower, heel, or toe. And there's a lot of variance that comes from it. Now, one of the things that I can only speculate about is over the evolution of these Titleist drivers since we got away from the numbered drivers, if you will, and got into the TS, the TSI, the TSR, now the GT. One of the things that we're seeing as a broad statement for example, the 2 model, when the 2 model first came out, it was much what appeared to be wider and flatter, almost like I'll use the word smush pancake, if you will. And obviously the size didn't change. It's 460 cc's and there's only so much that you can do. But what that does when you have a driver that's a little bit larger, especially from front to back or heel to toe, is it innately creates a little bit more forgiveness through the increase in MOI or moment of inertia. Now, as a very general rule of thumb, these higher MOI drivers, for the most part, tend to spin a little bit more. And that's also one of the reasons that they're a little bit more forgiving is I believe that more players benefit from having a little bit too much spin than not enough spin. Not enough spin is a very dangerous world to live in. And so as these series have gone from, say, the TS to the TSI to the TSR to the GT, one, that head shape has gotten a little bit more tour player preferable, if you will. It's got a classic look to it. It doesn't look like an overly large game improvement forgiving style head. The second thing that we're seeing is pound for pound with when we compare similar lofts, a 9 to a 9, a 10 to a 10, is generally they can get them to spin just a little bit less. So these new GT2s are sort of spinning and looking like the old TSI, TSR 3s, and they're creating similar performance characteristics, even though the models are a little bit different. You add that with some nuanced changes in the ball and the evolution of, say, the Pro V1 and their line of balls. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to, does the ball produce the shot the player is expecting? And if they can get a head shaft combination to go through a certain window and to fly the way they want it to and optimize that ball flight while increasing the forgiveness, that tends to be a win-win. And so I'm speculating a little bit, but that's probably what we're seeing is players are able to create a similar characteristic to the old 3 model, but with a more forgiving 2 model, and that's going to allow them to have better misses.
Yeah. Now, is that anything that you've seen, in fittings down there where maybe a player comes in with, maybe they're playing an old Titleist, a TSI 3 or TS 3, and they come in and they're walking out with, a GT2?
Yeah, so we're seeing either a little bit of that, or if they're staying within the same model, we may be adding a little bit of loft. So
Okay.
for the players who say we're in a TSI or TSR 3, maybe they were playing, say, a 9 degree, and now we go to a 10 degree, launches it a little bit higher, but keeps the spin down. And generally speaking, a little bit higher launch, less spin is a really good recipe for the forgiveness side of things. Now, I like how Titleist sort of has framed it in their marketing material that the 3 models are for players who are a little bit more consistent with their strike location, where the 2 models are generally a little bit better for players who utilize more of the surface of the face, meaning it's a little bit more forgiving. But then there's sometimes just these little nuanced things where, a player may just gravitate toward the look or the feel. And then there's definitely some things that we can do as a broad statement, like a 10 degree GT3 and a 9 degree GT2. We can sort of create similar characteristics. But there's a very small difference in the feel. That's something that necessarily can't always be measured, but some players can pick up on it. Sometimes it's a shape. The GT3 a little bit shorter from front to back. Some players really like that. Some players like it a little bit longer, feels a little bit more confident. And then there's, again, these little nuanced things of like, how does the club sit? Maybe when they put the club down, they like the way that it sits, whether it appears to their eye open, neutral, or square. But as a very general rule, if they are, like we said before, kind of staying within that world, we sort of loft up a little bit. Myself, as an example, I was playing a 10 degree for a long time. Now I'm in an 11 degree for that very reason. Is the GT3 just happens to spin a little bit less than what I've seen from other drivers in the past. And by going up a little bit, I'm now picking up a little bit of carry distance, and my misses are still very good. And that's partly just the technology of the club and getting the swing dialed.
Yeah, very nice. Well, yeah, we're going to move from kind of drivers into fairway woods, and I think this is one of my favorite categories looking at the Ryder Cups. Players, what's in the bags is there are a lot of older model fairway woods in play. I mean, you have, Titleist 915F of Patrick Cantlay, a 915 FD5 wood of Justin Thomas. You have Bobby McIntyre playing a TaylorMade Aeroburner, Justin Rose in the TaylorMade M6. What you can kind of give us your reason, like why do you think these guys are staying with older clubs, older technology?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, right? And I think trust is a big word that we're going to keep coming back to. And one of the things that's interesting about this, going back a couple of months, we did some great content when you and the team, we went down, we checked out some tour trucks. Drew and Zach were down here. A great example is we went onto the Cobra tour truck down at the Colonial, and they were building a fairway wood for Gary Woodland. And it was a really cool process to kind of see what they were doing. And even these tour reps who are working day in, day out with the best players in the world will tell you the fairway wood is the hardest one to fit. It's generally regarded as the hardest club to hit because you have the longest club with the least amount of loft that you are not necessarily hitting off of a tee. So there's a lot of precision involved in those strikes. And what we're finding is when a player finds a club that does what they want it to do, they are going to stay with that club until they find something that is better at that job. And so with the driver, it's fairly easy to understand that if you can hit the ball further and hit more fairways, then it's better. But with a fairway wood, the question really shifts to, well, define good. What is going to make that club good for you? And we see, especially with better players, that they might have a preference about how that club is used. One of the questions that I ask players when they come in for a fairway wood fitting is just that. How do you plan on using this? Is the purpose of your 3-wood to be a driver alternative that you're primarily going to take off at the tee, but you feel a little bit more confident, you can hit more fairways? Is this something where you're primarily hitting it into greens, attacking par fives or really long par fours? Does it need to serve dual purpose? It has to be a workhorse and work all over the course. So when a player has an idea of what they want this tool to do, then we have an idea of how to make it better. And for really good players like we see out on tour, they've found a tool and they trust it. They know what it's going to do, the window it's going to go through, how it's going to move, how it's going to react. And so even though certain technologies may improve, there's a familiarity, there's a trust. I believe that Titleist 5-wood you were talking about with Justin Thomas, I think he's had it in the bag since either like late high school or his college days. I mean, it might not go anywhere anytime soon. He's obviously one of the best in the world, and it's still working. The other side of the coin, it's interesting. You had named a couple of things like Bobby McIntyre and his Aero Burner. There's a couple models out there that when players come in for a fitting, if they have certain models, I won't name them, you can find them in our Second Swing pre-owned catalog, but there's certain models that when players come in, I straight up tell them, okay, I might not be able to beat this. And just for one reason or another, they're just good. They just work. They're simple. They're hot. They're forgiving. And it's a tricky one. And so when you find that club that you can effortlessly hit off of the ground, you can hit it high, or you can stripe it off of a tee and always hit a fairway, there's a trust. There's a familiarity. I mean, I'm guilty as anybody. I had a old Cobra Fly Z Plus 4-wood in my bag from I got it in 2015, and I finally replaced it a year and a half ago. But it was hard. The last couple of years, I tested new fairway woods, and they were good. But when it came time to, hit a shot, I knew this old Cobra could do it. And I finally took it out of the bag. I finally got it. It's still at home. It's not going anywhere, but I finally found one that does what I want it to do slightly better than the old one. But it took a long time. And so there's a comfort about it. And again, it comes down to how you use it. Like for myself, I want it to be off of the tee. I want to be able to hit it into a green, but I also really like short game stuff around the greens with my fairway woods. I'll chip from 50, 70 yards out all the time. I love that shot. I like seeing it on the ground. And so having a club that can do that for me too is something that not a lot of people are hitting that shot. But for me, it's got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And I found things that I trust and I know how it's going to react.
Yeah, you're talking about, people bring in a certain club, it's going to be hard to beat. Jake Montgomery always brings up if someone walks into a driver fitting with a Ping G400, he already knows, like, hey, that's going to be a very tough club for me to beat, which is good. I mean, obviously, shows you that old technology still works, but also it's great to just test it to see if there is something that might help you kind of minimize those misses a little more.
Yeah, and that's the best part about our Second Swing fitting process is we are unbiased. We go through a very, unbiased, agnostic approach is the way to do it. If you have the best club and we go through our process and it's still the best, we'll tell you. But if we can beat it, we'll explain why it's better, and we can actually point to different numbers or patterns and explain this is why it's better. It's not just a trust me. But at the same time, if we can't beat it, we'll tell you. We will encourage you. Please just keep playing it. It's great. It's doing what you want to. Save the money.
Yeah, absolutely. And for any of those just joining us, we are here with Second Swing Master Fitter Blaine Seitz. He's joining us live down at the PGA of America Coaching Center in Frisco, Texas, at our fitting center out there. We are talking all things Ryder Cup, what unique clubs, club trends, and kind of what we're seeing in fitting bays, for the everyday golfer. So continuing in with fairway woods here, this one just a quick one. The TaylorMade QI10. If you go look at the guys that are playing this week, it is by far the most popular single model out there. Obviously, you have your Scotty Scheffler and your Rory McIlroys playing it, but then you have Tommy Fleetwood plays the 9 wood, and you have JJ Spawn in there with a 3 and a 7 wood. What have you seen? I know it's not brand new this year, but brand new last year. But what did you see in fittings that really stood out to you about that specific fairway wood?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. We had kind of just come out of the stealth world, stealth first gen, stealth second gen. Then we get into this QI10. Now it's the QI35. And one of the things that we've seen with TaylorMade across the board is this investment in carbon technology. Now, they haven't introduced it into the faces of fairway woods yet, but they're most definitely utilizing it in the rest of the construction of the body, whether it's the crown or other pieces as well. And one of the big pieces of feedback that we ended up getting when the QI10 came out is that a lot of players really liked the way it looked. It sat very clean onto the ground. It was very easy to hit balls off of the turf. The face was fast, and it had a lot of forgiveness on those mishits, whether toe side or heel side. And on that note, one of the things for those of you watching that makes a club forgiving, let's just grab, I don't have a QI10 with me, but I do have a QI35 right here in front of me. And this is a rule of thumb across the board on almost every wood, and it's been this way for over 100 years. I can run into the other room, go grab some of my old hickories. But for those of you that don't know, when we look at a club, the club on a wood is not flat. The face is not flat like an iron is. We have curvature from the heel to the toe, and we also have curvature from the top to the bottom. And companies are putting a lot of R&D into these geometries here. And what it allows the club to do is become more forgiving for the size of the club that it is. And so we have what's called bulge and roll. And what it essentially does is if you hit it low on the face, there's less loft there, but it's going to increase the spin of the ball, pull it up into the air. If you hit it high on the face, it reduces the spin, prevents it from knuckling. Toe side is going to put some draw spin, and heel side is going to put some draw spin. Well, what we find on really well-engineered fairway woods is that they've gotten those geometries right, where you can preserve ball speed and flight characteristics even when you miss the sweet spot. And this was something that we saw a huge push just a couple of years ago across all brands to kind of make some changes in those geometries. And TaylorMade did a great job when pairing it with the aesthetic preference that they're getting off of their tour players. And we tend to see some trends go back and forth. There are other brands that were maybe they go into a shallow face, and then the next generation's a little bit deeper face, and then we're playing around with a couple of things. But what was nice is that, again, very clean lines. They were able to lower that CG. We still have things like twist face technology. And then they also introduced a couple of different models. You have their core model. There's a tour model with a very low CG that can be moved. We have draw bias models. So a little bit of everything for everyone. And so I find, at least in the fitting bay, that the aesthetic preference is a huge one. Players tend to have a lot of negative association with their fairway woods. Maybe historically they haven't hit them well. It could be a club that they pull out, say their 3 wood, and their self-talk is, man, I hope I don't hit this bad, or man, I just topped it twice on the range today. Do I really want to play? Right. And so when you start to get something that you look at and you're like, oh man, I feel like I'm going to hit this well, you're already more than halfway to the battle. You're probably going to hit it well if you believe that you're going to. And so by having a club that looks really good, but it also performs, we see a big trend there. And so I think what's probably happened, again, a little bit of speculation, but some of these players that were using the QI10, maybe they were using an older model. We've heard, for example, Rory McIlroy talk about how much he loved the M2 series. And so I'm guessing that a lot of these players, without looking too deep, were playing a previous gen, maybe something they were comfortable with, kind of like what we were talking about with the drivers, players still just playing some older models. And then they found, hey, this QI10 is nice. It's hitting the shots I want to. I can hit it off of the turf. I can hit it off a tee. I can shape it. It's doing everything they want to. And so now, as good as the QI35 is, it's just got to earn their trust. And for the players who can go through their testing or play and see the results, they're going to move into the better technology. And for other players, they're just going to play what's familiar. And at the end of the day, everybody says they want to be more consistent. I believe everybody wants to be predictable. And if you're predictable, you can play it. And predictability and consistency, they go hand in hand. But really, if it's predictable, like I don't care if you're about to top the ball 150 yards. If you know it's coming, you can play it. And so predictability is really the name of the game.
Yeah, love that saying. And I guess one more fairway wood question. Now, one of the biggest trends we've seen, I know you've seen in the fitting bays, we've seen in golf, is kind of the popularity of high lofted fairway woods and the gain in popularity they're seeing, thinking 7 woods and 9 woods specifically, but obviously there's more woods than that, 11s, 13 woods, you name it. 7 of the 24 players have a 7 or a 9 wood in their bag. So nearly a third, which I think is pretty significant. Once again, just for people that might be thinking about it, what are the advantages of, a 7 or a 9 wood compared to a long iron or a hybrid?
Yeah, so let's start by backing up of when we talk about that kind of top position or the blending of the bag, long game clubs, if you will. There's really 3 different categories. We have our irons, we have hybrids, and we have fairway woods. Well, when we look at really some of the main things of what makes a club work, we need ball speed, very important. We need a proper launch angle, and we need spin rate. And if we can get the ball to come through the right window with the right launch and spin, it's going to fly properly. Well, what ends up happening is on a fairway wood in particular, because the club is so long and because there's such little loft, it means that creating the launch and the spin conditions becomes a little bit harder. So we really need ball speed. And generally speaking, players with a lot faster club speed can make less lofted clubs work, like 2 irons. You typically don't see a 2 iron in the hands of a really slow player because they can't produce the ball speed to make it work. And because the loft and the spin innately aren't there, it's a really difficult club to hit. So what we end up finding is when we go into, say, a hybrid or we go into a fairway wood, they're going to create a little bit more of the launch and the spin because we're able to pull that center of gravity lower and further away from the face. We also see better ball speeds, not only because the face can flex a little bit better than, say, an iron can, but we also have the forgiveness and you don't have to hit the middle of the face so much. So we've known this for a little while. Great example, Tiger Woods historically played a 2 iron for a very, very long time. A lot of the really great moments that we know in Tiger's history have been 2 irons. But he'll even tell you he doesn't swing fast enough and the ball these days doesn't spin enough for a 2 iron to be effective in his bag. So he will switch over to a 5 wood. Now, traditionally, a 2 iron at 18 degrees and a 5 wood at 18 degrees have the same loft, but they're going to come out very, very differently. On robot testing, you might have, say, an iron. Let's just say I'll use numbers for myself, not that I'm a robot, but my driving irons go about 85 feet and I can get a fairway wood about 125 to 135 feet up in the air. So even though they're covering a very similar distance in terms of my carry, they're going to get there really, really differently. And so one of the things that we're seeing is this trend is just progressing down the bag. So players have figured out, hey, I'm going to hit a 5 wood instead of a 2 iron. But now it's turning into, why don't I hit a 7 wood instead of a 4 or 5 iron? Why don't I hit a 9 wood instead of that 5 or 6 iron? And one of the things that especially better players want, for the most part, it's condition dependent, but they want the ball to land really softly on a green. That was one of the reasons why guys like Jack Nicklaus were so dominant, as he could hit his long irons really, really high. So if you're playing on a tour venue like this week at the Ryder Cup at Bethpage and you have really long holes or maybe holes where the greens are elevated, you need to get that ball high so that it can have a proper landing angle to even have a chance of holding it. I believe it's hole number 4 famous hole there at Bethpage. I hope it's number 4 because I'm going to make a fool of myself if it's not. But it's generally regarded one of the best par 5s in golf.
Yep.
It's a very much risk reward. You can try to get it in 2. You can play strategically in 3. You can go very, very in depth of the strategy of how to play that hole properly. But that hole has a very, very high elevated green that's very small that pitches away from players. So they have to hit something high into it, or they're going to have to do something like maybe try to hit a big old cut to try to get a little bit of stopping power, unless they play it as a 3-shot hole and try to come in sideways with a wedge. But it's Ryder Cup, match play or things, different formats there. So it'll be really interesting to see how they tackle it. But something tells me most of the players are going to try to go for it. So it comes down again, easy to hit, very forgiving. So preservation of ball speed or more consistent distances and tighter dispersions. And then it allows that ball to land a lot softer, which allows you to get a little bit more aggressive. It's a lot easier to hit a 7-wood into a green than a 3-iron. And finally, I let my ego go and switched out my 3-iron I played for a long time. I finally took it out, put a 7-wood in last year. I don't know if I'll ever go back. It's that good.
Is that something you're also, I guess, seeing in fittings is, this just tends to be a better fit for this person. They're getting more peak height, more spin. It's giving them more consistency in that, kind of that gap of the bag.
Yeah, it's almost across the board. It's very rare that I make a club suggestion without testing it. But as a very general rule of thumb, almost everybody's going to benefit from a 7-wood. Now, there are exceptions to that. We have maybe a really high-speed collegiate player who hits the ball a mile in the air already. No, that might not be the club for you. But for the vast majority of players, it's a really big advantage. And generally, the conversation comes up during a fit where the player will ask, maybe we go through an iron fitting and the suggestion is, hey, let's do a 5-iron through gap wedge. And inevitably the question comes, well, why not a 4? Why not a 4-iron? And I generally will say, well, let's try maybe something like a 7-wood first and see if that's still something that we want to hit. And I think it's getting a lot easier, the conversation, because more people are seeing that tour players are playing 7-woods. But if they've never hit one before, they're very skeptical. There's this old world belief that high lofted fairway woods are for old players or slow players. And obviously that's not true anymore. And so inevitably what happens is I convince them like, hey, just give me like 1 or 2 shots. If we don't like it, we don't like it. And then they'll hit it and it's just amazing. And they will look at you like, what was that? That was so easy to hit. I've never hit a ball that high in my life. It's going a mile and it's super easy to hit off of the ground. And being here at the coaching center where we have the ability to go outside and hit off a turf, it's a really easy sell. They can hit a 4-iron. I'll go grab a 4-iron and they hit a little missile and they're like, yeah, that's what my 4-iron does. And then I hand them a 7-wood and it just towers. And they're like, whoa, I didn't know I could do that. So it's becoming a much easier conversation these days. And the fact that I have in my fitting matrix 7-woods and 9-woods with stiff and extra stiff shafts just goes to show there's a need for it. And Tommy Fleetwood is right now the poster child for male professionals with 9-woods. It's way more popular out on the LPGA, and they've been using 9-woods for a very long time. But it is interesting that we're starting to see that transition. And I had one guy, this was maybe 3-4 years ago when I was at our Maryland store. He came in one day, and it was the only time I've ever seen it. He had a full bag of woods going up to a 15-wood. And then after the 15-wood, he went into wedges. But it was just an interesting conversation that in his case, it was all he felt comfortable hitting. And it was an interesting fit. And we got a little bit of a workaround and we figured out a good solution for him. I think we went into some of those Cleveland Halo launcher hybrid irons back when those were popular a few years ago. And it was a great transition for him. But it's definitely a club that's not for everybody, but be open to it, try it, see what it does. And then if you're not positive, as you know, here in Second Swing, we have a 30-day play guarantee. Come in and get fit or talk to our online team, go play it, go put it into practice and take it to your home course. If it's not doing what we think it should be doing, come back. We'll make it right. That's what our 30-day play is for. But until you see it, and then just the other side is the versatility of things that you can do with it. Like I said before, I mean, I love chipping with fairway wood, so I'll take a 7-wood from off the green and bump and run it all the time. It's a cool shot to hit. So definitely don't be afraid to experiment and try some new things. And if at the end of the day the long iron is the right thing for you, then great, go ahead and play that long iron. But something tells me you're gonna benefit by going into a high lofted club.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, conditions can always, make that club choice either simpler or harder. Obviously, if you're playing a lot of, higher winded areas, sometimes you want to keep that ball flight a little low. So it's obviously, if you have the luxury of being able to have both where you can, switch them out, based on the course and conditions you're playing, obviously that works really well. Now we're going to move on to the wedges. This one's it'll lead into kind of the main question, but looking at the guys at the Ryder Cup, 14 of the 24 players at the Ryder Cup play the pitching wedge that's part of their iron set in their bag. They're not playing an aftermarket wedge, your Vokeys, your Cleveland RTZs, which, it's not a overwhelming majority, but it goes to show you, the best players in the world are sticking with that pitching wedge in their specific iron set versus going to that Vokey. Most amateur golfers are probably not going to have that issue or shouldn't have that option, but more specifically relating it to their gap wedge. When do you recommend a player sticking with the gap wedge that's a part of the iron set versus, opting for that aftermarket wedge?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We talk about this almost every day in a fitting, and there's a number of factors that are going to go into it. One of them, probably the place to start, comes down to how you're going to use that club. So as a broad statement, set wedges, which are wedges that match the iron set, like a set gap wedge. Actually, let me grab an example. Just happen to have a couple right here for some fitting heads, but here we have a TaylorMade P790 gap wedge. It's the A wedge. This matches the 790 set. And then what we have here is the TaylorMade MG5 50-degree specialty wedge. So we have set wedges, they match your iron set, and we have specialty wedges, which is sort of built into the name. They allow you to more specialize your shots. So the first question comes down to, how are you going to use it? For a player who is primarily going to treat their gap wedge like an iron, a set wedge is a really good option. What I mean by that is primarily square face shots with either full power or maybe like a little punch or bump and run, but consistent ball position and basically treating it like an iron. So if your pitching wedge were a 10 iron, which it was for a very long time, then the gap wedge you can think of as an 11 iron. And then when we start to get into these specialty wedges, that's where things change a little bit. So when we look at the sole differences, might be hard to see on the camera, but the set wedge as a general rule is going to have the same bottom that you'll see on an iron. It's what say a Vokey would call an F grind or a full grind. It is, again, primarily designed for those square faces. When we get into specialty wedges, this is where things can differ quite a bit, where we might have a little bit more camber, or we might have a wider or more narrow sole, heel relief, trailing edge relief, toe relief. And what all of these different changes to the bottom of the club allow you to do is change how you hit the shot. You can move the ball back in your stance, up in your stance. You can lean the handle and change the face angle in different ways to hit different shots that deviate a little bit from your typical what you would hit off of a set wedge. So if you're a player who's maybe newer to the game, you haven't necessarily developed precision skill on how to really manipulate the club, or you're just looking for something that's a little bit easier to hit, then going into a set wedge is a really, really good option. We'll come back to lofts here in a second. But then if you're somebody who really likes to hit a number of different shots, then going into something that will allow you to hit those shots would be more of an advantage. The catch is it takes a little bit of skill development to hit those different shots. So it kind of comes down to where you're at, but also where you're trying to go. The other side of things is that lofts have changed a little bit over the last couple of decades. So these days, it might not be unusual to see a pitching wedge with like 42 or 44 degrees of loft, which by most measures is a very strong lofted club. For a very long time, pitching wedges had 47 to 50 degrees of loft on it. And so it's generally, when we get into these specialty type wedges, it generally starts to happen around those higher lofted numbers. We don't necessarily see specialty wedges in that 42, 44 range because you're primarily going to hit it like a full swing. But when we start getting up into the 48s and 50s and 52s for that gap range coverage, having a little bit more loft is typically where we're going to see those. And again, it comes down to, do we have a little bit more versatility with the club? Is that something that we even want? Maybe you're a player that you don't want it to be quite so versatile because your skill isn't consistent enough to really tap into it. So knowing your game, knowing what your long-term preferences are going to be, how much time you want to put into practice. So yeah, specialty wedge, it can open up new doors, but a set wedge is going to be tried and true. So for most players that I'm getting here in the Bay, recreational players, maybe low double-digit handicaps, we're almost always going with the set gap wedge. It makes it a lot easier to kind of get through the round, keep things a little bit more consistent. But when you get into that better player, or a player who wants to dedicate a lot of time to become better, moving into a specialty wedge and learning how to create all those different shots, there can be a big advantage to that.
Absolutely. Well, as we're going to go from wedges to putters now, Blaine. So kind of sticking with that short game, and this might be the most overwhelming trend you're going to see at the Ryder Cup this weekend, and it is mallets versus blade putters. 21 of the 24 players, as of the last update we got, are playing mallet putters at the Ryder Cup this year, which I think is a very stark contrast to what you've seen in Ryder Cups of past. But that's kind of the trend that's been happening in golf for a long time now, is just the continued rise in popularity among mallets. So what do you see in the fitting bays, whether it's through TrackMan or Quintech, whatever fitting, equipment you're using? What are you seeing that kind of signifies, a mallet might be a better option for you, or what, a blade works great for you? What do you kind of look for when determining that?
Yeah, so to borrow a line from Larry the Legend, Larry Bobka on our staff, he will tell you that the three most important things for putting are speed, speed, and speed, right? The best players in the world can control their speed. Now, beyond that, we also want the ball to start on line. And those are two very important things. The reason speed is more important is speed determines the line that the ball should start on. So the faster we hit a putt, the faster that the ball's moving, the less break the ball is going to take, and therefore would need a different line than if we come up, say, short. The catch is, if you're using a putter like, say, a traditional blade, and you picked a certain line for maybe a more aggressive putt, but then you toe it, and now you've lost all that ball speed. Well, it's not going to go in because you're on the wrong line for that speed. So one of the advantages that mallets have is it can preserve ball speed when hit off the center of the face, meaning you're going to be more consistent in your speed control, being more accurate with the line that you've then chosen. So that's probably the primary reason why players are going to a mallet over a blade, is they're just more forgiving. You can get away with missing the ball by a dimple or two and not be so penalized like you might be on a blade. Now, in somewhat recent history, I say somewhat because this has been a trend for at least the last decade, but blade putters, a lot of the manufacturers have started to put like port weights in the heel and the toe, where they can actually increase the density of the heel and the toe to make these modern blades kind of the way that old mallets used to be. Not everybody does it. There's pros and cons there, but the other side of it, that beyond what we can do with adding weights in there that is potentially an advantage, is mallets, just being larger, have more options for alignment. So players who use a longer line could be more accurate to that player than a shorter line. It's easier to aim. But we could also create things that aren't lines. Use a great example like Scotty Scheffler, #1 player in the world, recently switched to a mallet, tailor-made Spider. And we see on the Spider a different type of an alignment on the top. I'll grab one here. But just as an example, the top of the putter here, very different Because yes, we do have a line, but there's also a little bit of a section here that allows the eye to flow onto the ball. And depending on who you're talking to, some will say that the alignment near the face is most important. Some players say, our fitters will say that in the back. But at the end of the day, it's what allows you to square the ball properly. And that gives us more options. Now, take the same putter, get rid of all this together, and then you get Jason Day's putter. His doesn't have anything on it. He plays one that's blank, and that's just better for him. So while it is a factor, it's not the number one factor, but it gives us options, whether it's a single line, a dual line, whether you have a dot, whether you have tri-lines or tracks or flows or arrows. Every one of those little differences can really help a player feel that they're aiming it most confidently. And if you're able to get the ball to come off at the right speed on the right line, that's when they're going to go in. And so that's kind of the big thing that we're seeing is just you can get away with more. I mean, even the best players in the world, they want to be better putters. They're already really, really good putters. And so by having a tool that allows you to miss a little bit better and not have to worry about being quite so precise, that's going to be a big advantage. Now, the other side, why are some players still playing blades? It's probably the same reason like Justin Thomas is playing a 5-wood from over 10 years ago. He trusts it. It works. There's something very powerful about, hey, I've made 100,000 putts. I've won tournaments with this putter. I know it works. I trust it when the pressure's on. This is the one. Look at Tiger Woods. He's won, I think it was 14 of his 15 majors with the same putter. And so when you have something that you've put that much work in, it becomes an extension of who you are. And then that player might go to a mallet, which is technically more forgiving, but they may not hit it as well, whether it's an aesthetic preference or whatever the case is. There's so much of the art side to putting that sometimes it will weigh more than the science side does. Now, at the end of the day, we have a lot of different tools like Quintech and Sam Putt Lab that we can really help us dial in a putter. But if we give Scotty Scheffler a shovel, he's probably still going to beat us, right? He just understands putting. He knows how to get the ball in the hole. And so there's also that mental aspect to it as well. So the important thing is coming in, get a fitting, talk to your fitter. Is this the right thing for you? Yes, no, why? What can we do to improve it? Maybe you already have the right putter, but it's not the right length. And because of that, you're in a bad setup and it's hard to create that consistent speed. Maybe you're in the wrong thing altogether. And being able to talk to a certified fitter and measure some things with technology, that's where you're really going to get your answer. And then once you find a putter that works for you and you trust and you can build a relationship with, it's not unusual for that putter to stay in the bag for a very long time. And so it'll be interesting to see. I don't know what the numbers were from the last Ryder Cup, or at least the last time it was here in the States, but it probably wasn't 21 out of 24. Now, the interesting question will be in 4 more years when it comes back to the States, is it still there? Has it gone up? Is it all 24? Has it gone back down and players have moved back to blades? Time's going to tell, but as a very general rule, we do see that things are moving towards the mallets.
Yeah, and maybe in 4 years it'll be 21 to 24 zero torque putters.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm going to give you a guess here. Can you name the 3 players that are playing a blade putter?
I'm going to say Bryson DeChambeau's one because I don't think he's changed it.
Yeah.
I know it's not Patrick Cantlay. He went to a Phantom 5 prototype when he beat Bryson at the Caves Valley a couple of years ago. Rory switched. Oh God, I should no. I don't know the other 2. Colin Morikawa is a maybe. I don't know if he was toying around with one. I don't know if he committed to it.
Well, he's been toying around with a lot of different putters. Last update we got from Golf WRX was he's in the TaylorMade Spider Tours V, I believe. But the other 2 playing the blades are Ludwig Aubert. He's playing a White Hot Versa #1. Which he actually just put an AI1 insert in, so that's pretty interesting. And then Ben Griffin playing a Scotty Cameron Concept 2 Tour. So there are your 3 blade putters. And I have one question here from the audience before we kind of wrap up here. Blaine, so if you can just provide a quick answer here. Brian asks if a set of irons is shorter versus standard length and swing weight's lighter, then lengthening the irons will increase swing weight. Do the metal extensions reduce or eliminate the swing weight increase?
Yeah, so very good question. So yes and no. So when you have a certain club, let's just use a 7-iron as an example, standard length is 37 inches, and maybe it comes out to a swing weight of D0. Now, when you shorten it by a 1/2 inch, it is going to lighten that head up. I should know off the top of my head, it's either 2 or 3 points. But the point being, if you put that exact same 1/2 inch extension back into the club, it's not going to get you 100% back to that original swing weight, although it's going to be very close. The reason it's not 100% is you might have a 1/2 inch of extension making the club longer, but you also have about a 3-inch section of extension that's in the shaft. And that has a material weight, and that weight is going to slightly counterbalance it. So let's just say, for not exact numbers, if cutting a 1/2 inch off takes off 3 swing points, then putting the extension back in might give you 2 back. And then we might still need to put a small tip weight or a little bit of lead tape if you want to get an exact number. And it also depends on the extensions that you use. Some of them have thicker walls than others in different weights than others. But because of where that weight is located so far down towards the butt, it will have an effect. It just won't be 100%, but it's going to get you a lot closer. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. Yeah. Hopefully that answers that for you, Brian. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to send them our way, and we will have, fitters like Blaine provide you guys with the answers. Blaine, thanks again for, taking time out of your day to hop on here and, talk Ryder Cup golf clubs. If you're in the Dallas area, well, there's no better place to get a club fitting than Second Swing, and especially out at the PGA Center there with Blaine. So head to our website at secondswing.com to schedule any fitting you want with Blaine. And then if you want more information on all the clubs in play at the Ryder Cup, you can head to our website. We have the What's in the Bags for all 24 players, top trending clubs, and then we'll have a unique clubs in play blog coming up here too. So you can check out all the equipment that the best players in the world will be playing this weekend. Blaine, thanks once again. Before we let you go, what's your prediction for the Ryder Cup score and who wins?
I would love for it to come down to a 1/2 point on the final hole. Team USA takes it home.
Yeah, Cam Young in the final match getting the clinching point in his home state. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it would be a great story. Just kind of wrap it all up.
Awesome. Well, anyways, thanks again, Blaine, for tuning in, and everyone, thanks for joining us for another Live at Lunch. Stay tuned for next week, where we'll be testing some Rory McIlroy protos against some P7 TWs, a little Rory versus Scotty with a little Tiger Woods in there. So make sure you stay tuned for that next Wednesday, 1 o'clock, right here on the Second Swing YouTube channel. Have a good week.